All right, we are live. We'll just give it a couple minutes for our friends to populate. All right, there we go. Folks are starting to join us. So welcome everyone. If you are here for our webinar on the enrollment relay, you're in the right place. So thanks for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are. While we wait for a few more folks to catch up with us and dig into the content, feel free to let us know where you're joining us from, whether you're K-12 or higher ed. We've got a nice mix of both, so we'll make sure that the content is super relevant to both audiences. I'm happy to serve as your K-12 translator as we go through the deck, but we're glad to see you here and welcome. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get going. So a quick bit of housekeeping to answer all the questions that we always get every time we do a webinar. The first being, is the webinar being recorded? Yes, it is, as always. The webinar is being recorded and we'll make sure that we send that to your inboxes tomorrow. And if you have a question or want to chime in, comment on one of the things that we covered today, feel free to do that in the chat or the Q&A. We're not picky. I'll be keeping an eye on both. So definitely drop that in there. And do that at any time. We are going to do an open Q&A at the end, but if something comes to mind along the way, we would love to, oh goodness, so much love happening in the chat. I love to see that. We're happy to answer it, happy to hear your feedback. We want this to feel as interactive as possible. So definitely chime in as we go. And here's a look at what we're going to cover. So we are going to start with Jen from Ambio talking about digital fatigue and how the landscape is changing. I know we all love that word landscape in the age of AI. The new frontier, which is video first. And then Matt's going to chime in and talk about the importance of your website experience and how the student journey typically breaks down once they get there. Austin's going to kick things off on all things Halda, talking about the traditional ways of recruiting students and how we approach things as Halda, and then we'll give you a playbook for moving forward and take your questions. So with that, I'm going to kick things over to our panel for introductions, and then we'll jump right into the content.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. Hi, everybody. My name is Austin. I am a product manager over at Halda. So working to understand how do we engineer the best solutions to fit your enrollment and marketing problems. Been with Halda for about 9 months, but my background is largely higher education. So I've worked at larger enrollment services firms as well as directly within admission. So happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
And hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lonkar. I'm the co-founder of Ambio EDU. And like Austin, I have been in higher ed marketing space for close to 17 years now. I basically have grown up with digital marketing, you could say. I was with Carnegie for over 13 years, so bringing digital marketing to higher ed way back when. So now have dedicated my career and focus to talking about video first strategy and performance TV in particular, but how it works together as a whole. I'll pass that to Matt.
Hello, everyone. I'm also from the Ambio team, and also, like Jen and Austin, have close to 2 decades worth of experience here in the higher education space. At Ambio, I serve as the executive director of brand strategy, really focused on storytelling, both for the Ambio team, but also for clients. And prior to that, I worked internally at a number of institutions on both the marketing side, but also on the faculty side. So happy to be here and happy to have this conversation.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. And before I kick things off, I should probably tell you who I am. I am Angela Brown. I'm the Director of Marketing at Halda. And the last 10 years of my career have been split between K-12 and higher ed. So happy to continue to offer my services and expertise to both and to be your MC today.
Amazing. So I'm going to kick us off, and I want to take everyone on a little bit of a time travel back to 2010. I want to rewind just a little bit. And 2010, you're probably wondering why I picked that year, but back then in 2010, digital marketing was brand new to higher education. And so as you can see from this graphic, this is actually one of my favorite graphics to use. Back in 2010, digital was shiny and new. If you ran a Facebook ad or a display retargeting ad, you were able to stand out pretty instantly because really hardly anyone else was doing it. I remember traveling around the country, talking to schools about retargeting, display retargeting, which when we talk about that now, it's probably the most simple form of digital marketing that you can do. But believe it or not, back then in 2010, it was brand new. And people used to look at me like I was crazy, and they'd say that was Big Brother and that's creepy. And, we're just dabbling and dipping our toe in digital marketing. So back then, about 23% of budgets were dedicated to digital. And now, obviously, this is not going to be any shock to anybody. The landscape definitely has changed, and about 90% of the spend is dedicated to digital. So the result is that what used to be fresh and exciting back then is now a very crowded and noisy space. So these students are hit with these digital ads on a daily basis, every day, and it's really not any guaranteed way to stand out anymore. So it's actually, in fact, kind of the opposite, and has become harder than ever to break through that noise, which is why we really need to think as an industry, rethink how we connect with these students. And that's what we're actually going to talk about today is part of what we're going to talk about is how to cut through that clutter. Next slide, Angela. Awesome. So the challenge that we have here, it's just the reality is that it's kind of funny too. So even though digital was new to higher ed in 2010, it was not new to everybody. I always like to say that we are 100 steps behind the real world in marketing. And so we can say 2010 was 15 years ago, but this particular generation has actually grown up with digital marketing as a part of their everyday lives. So their Facebook and Instagram feeds have been full of ads as long as they can remember. And what that's done is that constant exposure has really changed the way that they engage online. And these students have actually become experts at tuning things out, if you will. So they scroll past things without a second thought every day. They know when someone's trying to sell them something or when someone's trying to pander to them. They've really gotten good at just looking through it, if you will. So when digital was fresh and new, for all of us, think about how it affected all of us. Seeing an ad pop up in our feed was different. It was interesting. It was new. But we fast forward today after 15 years of scrolling through sponsored posts and banner ads. It's really become stale for a lot of us, and especially students. So they don't see it as special anymore. It's just background noise. They've learned to ignore it. They've learned to keep scrolling. So for us, that means that if we want to reach them, we can't just keep piling on more of the same. And we need to think about what actually grabs attention in a world where scrolling past ads has really become the norm. So breaking through the clutter. Oh, you did flip already. Sorry. That was, I must have like a little delay on my side. So I apologize for that.
It's all good. It's all, I got trigger happy and I went a little too fast, but we're all set.
That's okay. So when we talk about this, breaking through the clutter, we're going to talk about a couple different things. There's going to be one that I'm going to focus on specifically, but really we need to think about, and I tell schools this a lot now, is, and I can tell you this, when I say that things have become cluttered and I say that things are different, this has come not just from observations I've made, but real conversations with clients too. I'll go into meetings over the years. I would go into meetings and clients would say, our digital is just not performing. It used to be great. It used to just perform really, really well. And we've just seen a drop off. And going back to digital strategists and talking to them and saying, okay, this is what the client is seeing. They're just not getting the same number of students. And the answer would always be, well, they need to spend more. They need to spend more. And that follows right along with everything that we're seeing, because in a very crowded marketplace, it does become harder to stand out. And if you do want to stand out more, you do have to put more money towards it. So, that obviously can't be the answer all the time, because our budgets aren't growing. If, in fact, a lot of them are staying stagnant or shrinking. And so, looking into things, we need to figure out a way to do things differently and to work smarter and not harder. So there are a couple ways that we can cut through noise, and some of the different things that we focused on. One of the first things is, testing new channels. And I think it becomes really important to definitely test new channels before you scale. But I think it's also important to talk about that students are not living in a vacuum. They're not living in just one space online. They're on TikTok, they're on Reels, they're streaming audio, they're watching short form video. Their attention is very, very fragmented. And this is why it's really important to, and smart to pilot new channels in small ways before you put a heavy spend behind them. But it will also keep your strategy fresh, and it will keep you aligned with where those students actually are spending their time. The other thing that you can do too is to use student-generated content where possible. And some of you are already doing this really well. Some clients really haven't dipped their toe in that yet. But I think it's really important, because it's easy for us to write really polished copy, but nothing resonates more with students than seeing another student's perspective on things. So it could just be a quick clip. It could be a story in their own words. Sometimes I tell clients, we do commercials for clients, I tell them sometimes it's just as much as having a student narrate on the back end and tell their story. Students want to hear from other stories, and it really carries a lot of authenticity that we just can't fake, and we can't write that into scripts. So that's something to think about too, is starting to incorporate that into what you're doing. And the other thing, and we'll focus on a little bit today, is really leading with video as a primary format and what you're doing. And again, I've seen some schools dipping their toes in this. Some schools are doing it better than others. But if there is one constant that I see across all of these channels, it's that video really performs the best. It's very dynamic, it's memorable, and I think the most important thing is that, and this is important to our audience, is that it meets these students where they are. So that's actually the perfect bridge to the next section. We're going to talk about that the new frontier really is video first. So when I say video first, I would say that it's really not just a buzzword out there. It's really more, I would say it's more of a fundamental shift that we're looking at across the industry and just across the digital stratosphere in general. So students today are spending almost half of their digital time actually watching video. So if you're thinking that video is just an extra piece of a campaign that maybe you should try out, we may be already steps behind in that space. So the reality is that video has gone from this shiny new toy to something that is an expectation. So 10 years ago, again, I'll take you back in time a little bit. 10 years ago, when we first started talking about video, it was really like this special piece that you saved for a big campaign because it was expensive. You had to have people on campus, you had to film things, you had to put it together. But now I think, so many schools have B-roll at their hands already. So many schools have been doing little snippets throughout time that there is content there that you can repurpose and things you can use it for. And also, students have phones. They live with their phones in their hands. It's very easy to flip a phone around and make some of that natural content that we can use. So, students really don't think twice about video. They expect to see it. They expect to see that video everywhere. And that's really how they learn, how they connect with people. And honestly, what's happening now, it's how they make decisions too. So when we talk about this new frontier of digital, I guess what we're saying is that if your strategy really isn't built to meet the students' expectations, you're going to lose their attention before you even have a chance to make your case to them. So that's where I come in on the next one. And when we talk about video first, it really means making video the foundation of your marketing strategy, not the add-on. So whether it's TikTok, Instagram Reels, or even if it's connected TV, video has become the way to break through those short attention spans, that multitasking that they're doing, that scrolling that they're doing, and all around that digital fatigue that they have. So I will say this too, that the proof is in the outcomes of what we see with digital. So one thing to think about when you think about video first is that when someone sees a video, they retain about 95% of a video's message compared to just 10% from text. That's insane. When you think about that, think about a video. 95% you're retaining that content versus a static ad, which would be considered text. That's just 10%. Very easy to scroll and very easy to forget. So if we want to connect with these students in a meaningful way, video, it's not optional. Again, it's a necessary thing to do. So when I'm saying video first, I don't just mean throw a video into your campaign. I mean, really start to think about how you build things around video. It's where students are spending their time. It's where they remember. And it's honestly what is going to stop that scroll. So you can go to the next one, Angela. The other thing to think about too, I've been talking about students. It's not just students. So all of us are actually systematically living in this shift. So I want to ask everyone out here to I always tell my clients, put yourself in the shoes of the student. Think about how you behave online, how you behave when you're consuming video, how you behave when you're watching TV. When was the last time that you actually said, oh, I'll catch that show live on cable tonight? I mean, probably not in a very long time unless it's sports, but that's a whole other shift that's happening. And that's coming too, to be completely streaming also. But really, streaming has officially passed broadcast cable, and it makes up almost half of all TV usage, which is wild because that shift has just happened in the last couple of years. So what used to be the alternative is now the default. So if we're really serious about being video first, we can't just think about video just in social feeds. We have to think about where the majority of video lives today, and that's streaming, which takes me to my next slide, Angela. So we know the numbers. We know that streaming has officially surpassed broadcast and cable, but it's really not just about those stats. It really sets the stage for an even bigger shift. So I want to talk about very specifically the magic of TV. So I say that to clients all the time. There's something magical about it. There's something magical about what TV does. There is a reason that it's actually been the most powerful medium that we've had for decades and decades. So when a message shows up on a TV, it carries automatic credibility with it. It really shapes how people see your brand. It feels bigger, more trusted, more memorable. And that's why TV's been around as long as it has. I actually was talking to someone at NACAC. I was just at NACAC this past week and was talking to someone, and she said, oh yeah, when I see something on TV, I'm like, oh, that brand, automatically in my mind, that brand is good. That's legit, is what she said to me. So, and that's what it does. It just creates this credibility around it. And now with streaming, we actually have the chance to bring that magic right into the living room to parents and students. So in the moments when students or families are relaxed, they're binge watching their favorite shows, It's not skippable. They can't skip the commercials, so they have to stay on it. They either change the channel or turn off the TV, which they don't. Think about how you behave, again, when you're streaming. And it's not easily ignored. It feels like you're actually speaking to them one-on-one. And this is what I tell clients. This is the first time ever that we have had a chance to get into the living room with these students and their families in an unskippable way. They're kind of forced to listen to you. And it has the reach and the credibility of TV. But the great thing about streaming is that we now have the precision of digital marketing behind it. So that combination never, ever existed before with TV. Traditional TV was very broad, but it could be very wasteful because you didn't know if you were reaching the right audience. And digital was very precise, but it really it's now lacking the impact that the big screen has in the living room. So performance TV, probably never heard of that before. It actually merges both. It's the credibility of TV with the accountability, the measurability, and the targeting of digital marketing. And so if we go to the next slide, this is where it gets really exciting. And so it doesn't actually make your brand just look bigger. It actually drives real action. And you can see in this slide, in this report, what happens when commercials start running. So think about your own habits and what you do. If you're sitting on the couch and you're streaming your favorite show, most of us have our phone with us or next to us, or another device, could be computer too. And an ad comes on the TV, something that you see that it catches your attention. What's the very first thing that you do? If you're really interested in it, you probably pick up your phone and Google it. That's just our human behavior now. That's just what we do. And curiosity drives that immediate search. And that's exactly why performance TV drives a tremendous amount of traffic to your website. So it's meeting these students, it's meeting these families in the living room where they are. And at the same time, it's in their hands because their phone is right there. So they don't have to remember to look you up tomorrow. They don't have to, most of us probably don't take notes and write down, oh, I'll make sure to check that out tomorrow. They can actually look you up instantly. So in a way, I tell people we're in a full circle moment. We've actually come full circle into how we run digital campaigns and how we track people. So if you remember back in 2010, again, I love to time travel, take it back again. What we were trying to do, the goal of digital marketing back then was just to get people back to your website. I would say to people, 98% of people will leave your site without taking an action. What if you could get 1% of those students back to your site to fill out a form? Would that have a big impact on your enrollment numbers? And the answer was always yes. So that was the holy grail, right? Getting them back to your site. And now that's exactly what students want to do again. We've seen it in the rise of stealth applicants. I think we really got away from that by pivoting to landing page first thought. And that's fine. Back then it was don't start any kind of a campaign without a dedicated landing page. But now these students are savvy. It's not necessarily what they want anymore. They want to do their own research. They want to fly under the radar. And where are they going to get that? They're going to get that from peers. They're going to get that on social media, and they're going to get it from your website. So they want to land on your site. They want to explore on their own, and they want to make up their own minds. The difference is with performance TV, it doesn't just create that awareness. It really sparks that instant action, and it will pull students to your site right away. You can go to the next slide, Angela. So, and I'm not just saying that, like that is not just theory. We have seen it time and time again with clients. So here's what it looks like in practice. And I hope that you can see some of these numbers. So we look at schools. Some of the schools we ran, like Arizona State, Iowa, Drexel, they saw hundreds of thousands of new website visitors in just a few months. And even some of the smaller schools, if you're familiar with them, Sweetbriar is a very tiny, small, all-women liberal arts school. They saw huge lifts in their website traffic. So this is a direct line from the living room to your website. So this is the power of TV. This is the power of digital. We also see these secondary actions with social ads as well when using video first, because there's something compelling about it. And there's a way, you have 30 seconds of unskippable opportunity to say to students and families exactly what you would want to say to them and drive them to your site. So the big thing to remember here is that, and as I pass this over to Matt, once we get them to your site, this is just the beginning. It's what you do with them that is just as important, and what happens next, that's just as important. And with that, I will pass it over to Matt.
All right. Thank you, Jen. All right, so let's talk about the website experience. The good news is every higher ed website is in perfect condition. They've all been redesigned very recently. Everything runs smoothly, so there's really not much to talk about here, right? Unfortunately, in many cases, that's not necessarily the case. And I don't know if you can jump to the next slide there, Angela. But I want to start by highlighting a stat that for me was pretty eye-opening from a research project that I recently was reading through. And the stat that's here on the slide you'll see is that 73% of prospects say they will leave a website if they encounter any kind of friction. And additionally, in this same research, it was noted that 84 of the respondents indicated that a poorly functioning website would really negatively impact their perception of that school. So let's think about that. And again, go back to our own websites. If you're driving an immense amount of traffic to your site, but if the user experience isn't positive, that likely means that close to 3/4 of your traffic is going to be tempted to abandon you. So what's the solution there, right? And if having a friendly, user-friendly website, it may sound obvious, but unfortunately, and kind of going back to the joke as I started talking, university websites, in fact, are kind of notoriously known for being overly complex. They often are very difficult to navigate, especially for prospective students. And I think there's a few reasons for that we need to start addressing. And as marketers, as enrollment officers in the space, we need to really take a hard and fast look at our websites and talk about a few things. So first, I'd say that one of the problems that schools struggle with is this idea that websites, especially university websites, they're often built for kind of competing audiences, right? So you have a website that's trying to prioritize, say, alumni or alumni and donors. It's also trying to prioritize, say, an internal audience, so faculty, staff. And often, as you're trying to prioritize all of these different constituencies, what gets lost in very often is this idea of the prospect, right? So even though I would argue that that really is the core audience, the primary audience of any university website, often they kind of get lost. And some of that, like this information that we're probably prioritizing, or at the very least kind of treating equally, things like alumni benefits, faculty resources. It's not to say those things aren't important, but I think, again, we need to take a step back and think about, is that creating clutter for the prospective students? I think another thing that a lot of university websites really struggle with is this idea of content bloat. And I think as academics, right, I think it's kind of our gut instinct to kind of want to provide as much information as possible. But what research kind of shows is that unengaging text-heavy pages tend to overwhelm users, especially, and we'll go a little bit more into this here in a second, but especially if we think about the fact that they're likely viewing your website on a mobile device, right? And the other thing is that outdated content or duplicated content, again, some things that we often find on university websites also kind of contribute to a poor user experience, because then you're creating this scenario where, which program page am I supposed to follow? They kind of say the same thing, but not necessarily identically. Or one may feel outdated, whereas the other one is an update. And so this is something that, again, we really have to address. And then, again, as I kind of started, often because of this, core content is hard to find for prospective students. Well, what is that core content? Again, I think most research shows that the content that our students are looking for, right? It's program information. They want to know, do you have my program? And then they also very quickly want to understand the cost and then the ROI of this degree or this program. And so if that information is not front and center and something that they can navigate to from pretty much anywhere on your site in one, ideally, or at the very worst 2 clicks, it starts to become problematic. And you can go to the next slide, Angela. And so as we think about that, and again, I don't want to lump everyone in this audience into one bucket. Some of us very likely could have recently redone, your university site. Maybe you feel like a lot of what we're talking about here is either kind of obvious, because in many ways it is, or that you've addressed it at your own university, then that's great. And in that case, you're in pretty good shape. Unfortunately, again, what we see is that a lot of schools, this is a struggle. And so I don't want to pretend this is kind of an audit checklist. I don't want to pretend that in these 5 check marks that we're really outlining everything that would typically be part of a true web audit, which would typically also dig into things like structure, analytics, accessibility, SEO, you name it. But if we kind of zoom out and we just kind of try and understand our website from our prospective students' point of view, I think there are definitely some core questions which are outlined here that kind of can guide your thinking and guide conversations internally at your university. So just kind of going through this checklist, I won't read these word for word, but basically, first and foremost, kind of that idea of, does your primary navigation like make sense, and is it prioritized for a prospective student? Or is it structured more for every audience within your website, or even more, I would say negatively for prospective students, or is it prioritized for internal audiences, right? Are they going to land on your website and feel like you're not even speaking to me? If that's the case, there's a number of solutions, which I'm not necessarily going to get into, but I would definitely start having those conversations of, how do we make sure that like the core navigation of our site is very much structured for prospective students? And then again, we just talked about it, but things like programs, admissions criteria, costs, those are things that I would make sure are front and center on your website, that they're easy to get to. It should be, again, something the student can find in 1 or 2 clicks, whether they land and start their research on your homepage, or as we see, often students don't land on your homepage first. So it could be that they're coming in from really any part of your site. And no matter where they kind of come in, you really want to make sure that you're creating that doorway for them to find this core information very quickly. We also highlighted this a little bit, but university websites tend to pile up content over time, policies, campus updates, old event pages, etc. But unfortunately, every extra word, every extra paragraph, every duplicate page, those things can act as barriers for prospective students. So I would highly encourage the conversation around keeping your website clean, keeping it focused. I often see websites that, end up being 2, 3, 4,000 pages deep. And I think you should start asking yourself, do I need that many pages to tell my story? Do I need that many pages to really highlight what we offer? Or could it be done in 200, 300 pages, which may seem like a drastic reduction, but think about that. A 300 or 400 page website is still a fairly robust website. And so again, I think it's a conversation worth having. Also, every program page on your site, and really any of these core pages we've been talking about, you really need to think about content pathways. Are you creating any dead ends? Or are you always giving that prospect kind of a pathway to follow to learn more? And again, as Jen was talking about, kind of giving them an opportunity to create their own journey, right? Giving them an opportunity to explore in the way that feels right for them. That may be a long, extended process. It may be something that's short and sweet. But no matter what, you should really be giving them some content pathways to kind of follow. So if they want to see student stories, they can. But if they're ready to get to your application, that's kind of there for them too. And then finally, and this is something we've been talking about for a long, long time. So again, this is fairly obvious, but is your site mobile friendly? Have you prioritized it for, a mobile device like an iPhone? If you have, and you likely have at least made some strides in, to do so, then the next step I would say is also looking at things like your application and your forms. Are those also optimized? Are those user-friendly? Even if I'm on a subway and I'm trying to fill out that RFI form right on my phone. So not just having it be responsive, but really thinking almost mobile first. I think a lot of websites are often developed kind of desktop down. And I think what we're going to see is that a lot of websites very quickly, and in many ways already are, being developed kind of phone up, if you will. And so I think that's a good thing to really ask yourself as you, again, kind of do a top level audit on your site. So I kind of want to pause there before we jump into the next section and just ask everyone, again, just honestly, is there, as you think about your own site, is there a page or a section that trips students up on their journey that, you know, you've heard complaints about. Maybe you just know that as students try and navigate, maybe it's financial aid information, maybe it's program related information that, you know, is not really structured well, but you know that you've either seen complaints or just seen students and prospective students struggle with. And I want you to jot those pain points down. So those are things that you can try and address, you know, as you kind of carry on after this webinar. But more importantly, I want to just kind of pause there and open this up for conversations. If you either have a struggle, or even better, if you've had a struggle, whether it be big or small, that you've had some experience with and already are making efforts to improve, I'd kind of love to pause and just hear from the group, just to hear what people are doing to improve their web experience. Don't be shy.
We tend to have a quieter group on these, so we'll see. We'll see what's going on. Everybody kind of goes mute in the chat and sometimes in the Q&A. But
well, afterwards, I'd love to hear. You know, I think often people think of improving a website as this like giant project where we have to just get our website from the top down, and you know, I'm not going to say that often isn't the case of something that's needed depending on how old your website is, but often it's just a matter of tweaking your CTAs to make them more visible. Again,
exactly. That's a great example.
Yes.
That's a great example.
Or even, like I said, with content, looking at your program pages and saying, is there any information that I can, you know, streamline down so that it's something that's visible in 1 or 2 scrolls on a phone versus an infinite scroll. So I'm happy to chat more about this at the end, but I appreciate it. And let's pass it off.
I think the great thing too is that even if you make those changes super easily, Austin's going to talk about some things that can really help with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Right. It's
Jenny,
baton passing time.
Yeah. I'm glad we're not doing this in person. I feel like it might get dropped. Track and field background. But so Jen and Matt have talked a lot about, like, you know, now that we get students to the door and why a lot of them leave once they're there, I want to talk about, you know, what are strategies that we can deploy to avoid losing them? Like, once you've gotten their attention, they're on the website, how do we continue to engage them in really personal ways? So as we look at the student journey is from research all the way to deposit, right? Friction points are everywhere. And I'm sure those listening can identify for your own institutions where those are. But I think the reality is like, if you miss one of those friction points, the chances of you losing that student are high. And so at Halda, when we look at the student journey, what we see are a host of, I think, difficult trade-offs that your team has to make. So where are you deploying your resources, your staff, your time throughout this entire student journey to have the highest impact in terms of an enrolling class? Because I think if I asked all of you, hey, would you like to treat all of your, 300,000 prospects with the same personalized level of attention that your admission team is giving to your 1,000 admitted students? Or would you like to be able to provide the same level of service at 1 a.m. to a student on a holiday weekend as you can provide to a student who walks in your office at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday? You'd probably say yes, right? But the reality is you have to make trade-offs, right? You don't have staff up at 1 a.m. You don't necessarily have the resources to write individual emails to all of your 300,000 prospects. There are just these constraints in place. And so as our team looks at the student journey, the question that we're asking is, well, how can we allow your teams to make fewer trade-offs throughout this? And in making fewer trade-offs, decreasing those points of friction and increasing the student experience so that when they are on your site or when they are looking at your institution in high intent moments, they have what they need at that time, even if, let's say, your staff is asleep at 1 a.m., as they should be, right? So I want to take this concept and I want to show you kind of what it looks like for a real student. So this is Stephanie. We've given Stephanie a highly curated stock photo headshot. But Stephanie is a real prospective student that we saw on one of our clients' websites. And she was on the website at 1 a.m. on a holiday weekend. Angela, I think it was Labor Day. right?
It was, yeah. It was.
Yeah.
It was on Labor Day, actually.
Yeah, it was on Labor Day. And so I want to think about a world where, like, what does that look like today for most students when that happens, right? I think for these students, they are probably receiving some brochures in the mail. These are probably impersonal brochures. They're one size fits all. I would imagine most of them are postcards, right? Maybe some event invites. Stephanie's probably receiving emails that are personalized using maybe one merge field, if any. And that's not to bash on merge fields. I think merge fields are great. There's a reason we've been using them since 1980. But my point in saying that is that there's an upper limit to the individual attention you can provide using a merge field. And then she's there. She's on your website at 1 a.m. She is motivated. It's a high intent moment. And she has questions. And so what does she have to do? She peruses the website. Now, hopefully, to Matt's points, the website is hygienic. It's in great shape. It's easy to navigate. But now she has questions. And so what are her paths? Well, path one is I call the office. They don't pick up. I leave a voicemail, and they'll get back to me on Tuesday or Wednesday when the office opens up. Or even worse, Stephanie says they're not open. So I'm just not going to call, and I'll make a mental note to call later. And now we've lost her in this moment where she was motivated to explore this institution, right? We would call this the old way. So I want to talk about the Halda way of how do we meet these students in these high intent moments without your team having to make trade-offs. Like, your team doesn't have to be up at 1 a.m. talking to Stephanie on a holiday weekend. So again, what happened in real life for this client's website, because Halda was there, is Stephanie was on the website at 1 a.m. She was served up a dynamic AI form. So we asked her a few questions about her interests, her concerns, and she received immediate answers to her questions. Now she filled that out. She continued to visit different pages, and then she had more questions. And so she requested a text message conversation with an always-on student recruiter. And you can see here on Stephanie's timeline, she sat there at between 1 a.m. all the way down to almost 2 a.m. and was texting back and forth with an agent getting her questions answered. She goes to sleep. The next day, a one-to-one AI email generates that says, "Hey, Stephanie, we saw you on the website last night. Thanks for giving us your information. Because of who you are, we have more content on the website we think is relevant to you. Why don't you come back and check it out?" And so the next day, Stephanie clicks that link and she comes back to the website, right? And now when the admission team logs in on Tuesday, they can see the interaction, they can follow up with Stephanie, but they got their weekend off and Stephanie got her questions answered, and you didn't have to make some of those trade-offs that you would have had to made before. And so when we think about the Halda way, it's about providing that same level of student experience across all moments of that student journey, even if your staff can't always be there, or the volume at which you're communicating is too high for it to traditionally be individualized. So that's an example for one student, but we think about this same kind of trade-off approach throughout the entire funnel, right? All the way from the top where you're capturing students. So let's say for our higher ed partners, maybe at the search level, all the way down to yield, right? So if we're looking at the top of the funnel, I think traditionally we are running paid marketing campaigns, we're buying names, we're sending, email campaigns to those names with one or two segments in them. You've got direct mail, radio, billboards, right? We would say, hey, look, why don't you replace one of those or augment those existing strategies with AI email marketing, where you're taking, let's say, 300,000 students, and you're letting AI do the heavy lifting of saying, hey, we've got 30 plus data points on the student from a College Board list. Let's determine what is the best data point to use for every single one of these students. And so it's not just a one size fits all campaign at the top of the market, but we're letting AI do the heavy lifting of individualizing all those emails to be most effective, right? And then when students click those emails and they come to your site, they're not just coming to a static site with static RFIs or a tough site to navigate, but instead they're sitting there with forms and a hub that are greeting them. And there are inbound agents that can take their calls or questions, right? So when they arrive to that site, because so many of our partners are pitching students to the site, right? And as Jen was mentioning, students want to come back to the site, but when they're there, let's catch them, right? Let's answer their questions. Let's make sure that we can help serve up the most relevant information to them in those high intent moments so we can convert them when they're there. And then using behavioral emails, drive them back to the website, right? So they can continue to re-engage. And then again, as we head down into yield, the Halda way would be to say, hey, look, why don't you deploy a hub? Every student, every time they come back to the site, has their own personalized hub. That hub remembers who they are, the content they've interacted with, what funnel stage they're in. So every time that they come back, they're picking that journey up right where they left off. And they have that always on recruiter. So anytime they have a question, day, night, or 1 a.m. on a holiday weekend, they can get those questions answered, right? So all the great work that you're doing to get students to your site, whether it's through strategies that Ambio is deploying or through your own marketing campaigns, that's all really great, but it's even better when you're there to catch them on the site and convert them in those high intent moments then and every single time that they come back. So that's all great, right? But what are kind of 3 individualization moves to try? And you've noticed that we've crossed out personalization. We would say using the equivalent of a merge field is maybe personalization, right? I think individualization goes far beyond that, where, let's say if we're using the example of an email, the entire email is written for that student, not just one section or one content block relevant to that student's data. So the first move to try is add an always-on communication agent. I think there's a lot of talk right now about agents generally, but in higher education. And this always-on agent doesn't have to be proactive. This can just be a reactive agent on your website, right? So students can sit there and they can pick, hey, which communication modality do I want to communicate with? Do I want to call? Do I want to text? And so students can choose those moments when they're ready on your website. Also, we recommend triggering nudges tied to your deadlines, right? So rather than mass outbound emails that are application reminders, dedicated nudges to students based off of their behavior and their funnel stage. And then lastly, we all have demographic data that we're using, but can we go past demographic data and think about how do we leverage a student's behavioral data to inform the ways that we communicate with them? And by doing so, can we communicate with them in really timely ways and following up with the right information? Because we're looking at all of the active and passive behaviors they're taking and using that to inform what does the student need and how can we best communicate with them right now? So as we wrap up, I know we're almost at time here. Just to recap what we've talked about today, both what Jen and Matt have talked about. So kind of what's that playbook recap? So number 1, audit your digital spend for video gaps. Test one 30-second CTV campaign this semester. Number 3, fix one broken page in your .edu. I know that will make Matt very happy. Map one friction moment and add a personalized nudge, right? Where are students getting stuck? Can we just address that one moment? And then lastly, we encourage everybody, AI is everywhere. Maybe now's the time. Just pilot an AI-driven engagement tool this cycle. Not a full commitment, but just try it out. And I think you'll be impressed what AI can do for you and your students.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Austin. And before we get to our open Q&A, I have one question for our panel. What is one thing that you want to make sure that the audience walks away from this webinar with? What's one big takeaway? I know it's hard to choose. Surprise!
I'll start. I mean, Austin's given me a new buzzword, this idea of, individualizing your work versus personalizing your work. And I really liked kind of that concept, right? That I think often when we think about personalization, whether it be a web experience or, email marketing, yeah, you're right. It often is like slotting in that photo and adding the name there. But I really think that with AI tools, as we advance in marketing, like it really does, we have the tools now at our fingertips that are really giving us an idea. Even on the CTV side, we're having conversations about how behavioral marketing can truly allow us to like individualize that experience really all the way through the funnel. So for me, that's frankly a takeaway. Like I said, Austin's giving me a new buzzword to use, but it's really a takeaway that I hope the audience, finds useful as well.
Yeah. I didn't realize I was on mute before, and I thought you were just talking over me. I was like, why is he?
Oh, no.
What was that? That was really rude of you. So I'll say this, and everybody knows that I'm big on analogies if you know me. I would say if you take one thing away from today and thinking about all of this as a whole, don't let your enrollment marketing strategies feel like a rotisserie, just spinning around, same old, same old. I would say that students really deserve more of a fresh, engaging, and personalized experience across the board. So on your website, on, in your advertising, in your emails, everything. And I think the schools that are going to deliver that are the ones that are going to continue to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah. I would say, I think for a while we thought about things that scale. The higher the scale goes, the less personalized things get. And I think with AI tooling, we are realizing that that actually doesn't have to be the case. And so I want people to walk away thinking, because I'm doing things for 300,000 students, it doesn't mean you can't bring the same level of individualization that your team is bringing to 1,000 students. I think that trade-off doesn't necessarily have to exist anymore.
I love that. Great call outs, everyone. Okay, I'm going to peek over to our Q&A. I am shocked that we have no questions. So perhaps that means we just blew everyone's minds with your knowledge. And there are no questions left, or everyone's tired because it's the afternoon. That's okay. We'll give you guys one more minute for final call for questions before we wrap. As a reminder, while we're waiting for questions to come in, the recording for this will be sent tomorrow in addition to a copy of the slides. So if there's something you missed or couldn't see because of size or whatever the case may be, we'll make sure that you'll get those tomorrow. And feel free to share the recording with a friend or a colleague. We think they'll enjoy it for sure. Okay, I think that we're good to wrap, everyone. So thank you to our panelists, and thank you to all of you who joined us for this session. And please keep an eye on your inboxes for the invite to the next one. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.
Bye.